right, let's testify tonight.
Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. You, Lord. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it out. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Trusting to see you there first in the chat. Good to see you. So today we're going to be doing John chapter 11, but was it chapter 1? Because I think, yeah, because we did chapter 10 yesterday. Something seems off for some reason. But, yeah, we definitely did chapter 10 yesterday. I don't know. Something seems weird to me. Maybe, let's see. It doesn't enter the sheep pen, blah, blah, blah. We talked about it. Yeah, yes. I don't know what it is. Why I feel like something is off. Maybe I'm just going crazy. Anyway, I had an interesting thought before. Mark 14, yes. We're doing Mark chapter 14. And we're going to do Mark chapter 14 every day for the rest of my life. And that's a joke that there's only 2 people in the world other than myself would get. Anyway, before I get into the actual chapter of Mark, well, I had a thought. I was watching the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery this morning. And if you don't know already, this season of Discovery is revolving around finding the secret of the progenitors, the super race of beings introduced in Star Trek The Next Generation that supposedly planted the seeds of all humanoid life in the galaxy, which explains why there is so much humanoid life in the Star Trek world. And so they're trying to hunt down the preservers who had this incredible technology that could design and create life, and in the wrong hands, obviously, could be do unspeakable damage. Blah blah blah. And there's bad guys trying to get the technology as well. Blah blah blah. It's a race to get to find this technology. And I was just kind of popped into my head when I was thinking about it. Is there going to be some big twist, some big revelation about all this that might be interesting? And I thought of one that, at least as if I were writing this series, we started with this premise where I think I would go. And rumor has it, and I don't know if this is true, but rumor has it that at some point this season they're going to revisit the so-called mirror universe. And so, if true, I started to think, what would the mirror likenesses of the progenitors be? Well, since the progenitors' goal was to plant life throughout the galaxy, it would seem that their mirror opposites, their goal would be to wipe out all life in the galaxy. And that could set something up that's rather interesting. And since their technology is so super uber mega advanced compared to what we see from the Federation and other contemporary powers in the Star Trek universe, they could probably hop between the so-called prime and mirror universe with ease. And so there's no reason they wouldn't cross over. So could this be a forthcoming explanation as to the origin of the Doomsday Machine? The Doomsday Machine, because it seems like a robotic craft designed to do nothing more than wipe out everything it encounters. Sounds like the opposite of the progenitors to me. So that's just a thought of where I would go. I'm thinking about trying to slap together a video about that if I can manage to scrounge up a little bit of free time in the next day or two. But that's just my thought on that. Take for it what you will. Be curious to see if any of you have any input as to whether you think that's a sound idea or not. But that's not why we're here this morning. This morning we are here to talk about John. And thank you for the subscription. I can't see your name because I'm in the process of bringing up John, but thank you. All right. So today we're going to talk about the death of Lazarus. Not Lazarus from Star Trek. Lazarus, Jesus's pal. And this is one of the few times we actually get a little bit of a hint into Jesus's social life outside of his ministry. Because even though it's not much of a glimpse, we just know that Jesus had a friend named Lazarus, and they seemed like they were good friends. We don't know a ton about Lazarus, but I think it's interesting that Jesus. We always think of Jesus from his acts and everything when he was actively ministering to people. We don't realize he was a human being. He had friends. He had things he was interested in. He probably had hobbies and stuff like that. So that's just kind of interesting to me to think about. Anyway, starting in verse 1. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured the perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So it's telling you that if you've heard the story of the girl that poured perfume on his feet and wiped it off with her hair, that's her. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, obviously, there are some people that want to try to make this into some kind of homosexuality thing, but it's not. It's just saying that, hey, this is your good friend. This is someone you care about. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Now that might seem kind of weird. It says, so Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So he loves all 3 of these people, right? He thinks they're great people. So when he heard Lazarus sick, he didn't do anything for 2 days. The way that it's written, and I think this is a problem with presentism, when we think about, we put the way that we write things today compared to the way things were written back then, is we say, wait a minute. That would be like someone saying, my best friend in the whole world said, Michael, I desperately need your help. So I decided to do nothing for 2 days. And you leave it at that and say, well, that makes no sense. But it's because there is something bigger at play here than just Jesus' friendship with Lazarus, as we will see. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews were tried to stone you, and yet you're going back? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they will see this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Jesus loves to talk in parables, which confuses the heck out of a lot of people. Now, some people argue, well, wait a minute. There's not necessarily 12 hours of daylight. Depends. Only during like the equinoxes, there are actually 12. Is it the equinox or I think it's the equinox. That there are 12 hours of daylight. Other than that, there's either, more or less, depending on where you are, laterally on the earth. And it's like, that's not the point here. And the reason I point this out, I know that sounds like it's getting extremely pedantic about this kind of stuff, but I point this out because people try to use various verses in the Bible like this to say that the Bible is either incorrect because it doesn't describe it exactly as we understand it today, or that the Bible is some kind of scientific textbook because it implies something that they want to argue about, whether it be evolution or the shape of the earth or the age of the earth or anything like that. And the answer is Jesus was speaking in a parable, and much of the Bible is in parabolic form, in that it uses storytelling as a method of conveying spiritual truth. And this is something that a lot of people have a difficult time wrapping their heads around. And obviously when he's talking about stumbling during the day or stumbling at night versus the day, he's talking about being in the spirit as opposed to ignoring God's word. After he'd said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. And again, here's a section where people say, well, see, Jesus lied because earlier in this, it says, this sickness will not end in death. Well, see, Jesus lied because then he died. Except that this isn't the end. And that's kind of the point here, is that, this is just the midpoint in the story, not the end of the story. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go on to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, Thomas Potts should love that, so Thomas Potts should change his username to Didymus Potts, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. On his arrival, and Thomas is, again, it seems like Thomas is kind of being sarcastic here. Well, then let us go so we can die with him, right? And because they're afraid that he's going to get stoned to death the minute he walks into town. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will do whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So, see, Martha's faith is not in question here. She understands the concept of the death and the resurrection and all that. But she also sees limitations, like, hey, he's dead. He ain't coming back to the resurrection. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? And that's a tough one to swallow, because everything around you shows that everybody dies. And so if Jesus tells you, but if you believe in me, you're never going to die. And again, the problem is that he interweaves when he's talking about literal versus spiritual versus allegory, and it gets very, very tough to sort it all out. And I understand that, but we have to do our best to be discerning about what he's talking about. But notice he says, the one who believes in me will live even though they die. So whoever lives by believing in me will never die. So they will live even though they die. And by believing in me, you will never die. So your physical body will die, you'll be resurrected, but then you're going to be around forever after that. Yes, Lord, she replied, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, they replied. And then we have the single shortest verse in the entire Bible. 2 words. Jesus wept. And so keep in mind, just because Jesus understands and knows the glory of paradise and everything, he's also a human being. And knowing that your best buddy had died is heartbreaking, even though it shouldn't be. It's just the way that we are all wired, and Jesus was wired that way as well. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he had been there for 4 days." Yes, think about it. A corpse rotting for 4 days. Oh, it's Thomas. How you doing, Thomas? And it says Mary number 489992. Yeah, there's a lot of Marys in the Bible. I did like, if you didn't see it on Easter weekend, Saturday Night Live did a sketch where they were at the tomb. And of course, the joke was that when the stone rolled aside, Donald Trump came out because, he thinks he's he's like Jesus now. Not going to even get started about that. But one of the jokes that they did say that I thought was really funny is, and after we're done with Jesus's body, we need to come up with names other than Mary. And Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and when Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothing and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is a man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. Then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." So notice, you literally have the Messiah not only healing people, but now raising people from the dead publicly. And their thought is, oh, we got to stop this guy or the government's going to come down and be pissed off. One of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up, "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and to make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and they stood at the temple courts, and they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. So there you go. So Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and the idiots in charge of the church decide this guy needs to die. That's crazy, but it doesn't. The funny thing is, it's also totally believable, and people don't realize, that's just how people are. Thomas says, funny thing is Trump's mother is a Mary. I did not know that. Is Trump's mother's name really Mary? That is funny. Youngster says, I read somewhere when Jesus had the Last Supper, Martha was Jesus's aunt, so that would make Lazarus Jesus' uncle. So is that is that any nepotism there? Okay. They're not, I don't think they're talking about that Mary and that Martha here. The problem is that Mary and Martha, and by the way, Lazarus, and even Jesus, because Jesus is actually would be properly translated into the modern as Joshua. These are all very, very common names for back then. And so we've translated them into modern English, but the names that these were it wasn't like, it would be like saying, and then Jesus healed Bob, right? Well, there's Bob is Robert Kennedy, and Bob is Bob Vila, and Bob is Bob the Tomato. There's a bazillion Bobs. So just because Jesus healed a guy named Lazarus, whose sister was Martha and Mary, well, that would mean that Mary, in this case, was Jesus's mom. But if it was Jesus's mom, I don't think they, and notice they even made a point to try and identify Mary, to say that she was the one who washed Jesus's feet. And so that's not Mary, mother of Jesus. It's a different Mary. And if it's a different Mary who is sisters with Martha, then it's a different Martha. I mean, that's how I take it. Now, true or not, does it change the meaning of it? Even if that was his mom and his aunt, and therefore Lazarus was his uncle, does that change anything? No, because it was just showing that this was someone who Jesus was close to. And that's why he wept, and that's what, Jesus was a fully emotional human being. He wasn't just a walking stoic pillar of God. He was more than that. Didymus Potts says, almost sounds like witchcraft. Okay. Martha Wayne or Martha Kent? Yeah, exactly. See? Why did you say that name? So I guess Jesus is Batman? Or maybe Jesus is Superman. I think Jesus would be more likely Superman. Oh, Lordy. Yeah. So, Didymus Potts, hope you are doing well, my friend. Yeah, Thomas is the Aramaic and Didymus is the Greek. Both mean twin. So, in case anybody cares, Thomas Potts is now here, henceforth to be known as Didymus Potts. Because why not? I'm probably mispronouncing Didymus, but I think it's DidYmus. That's your name, Thomas. All right, anything else before I wrap things up? Small crowd today. Probably picked a horrible time to do this, but I had to finish watching Discovery first, so I could be ready for tonight's live stream. But anything? Going once? Going twice? Really? You guys are really quiet today. That's all right. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here then. No Penny. Wow. Yeah, I'm surprised Penny's not here. Maybe she didn't get a notification or she's listening to 75 other live streams right now because that's what she does. And she'll probably come on tonight and talk about how awesome all the other live streams were. A lost brain cells after Discovery. I'm going to save my opinion about today's episode of Discovery for tonight. I'm not going to talk about that. other than my thought about the Doomsday Machine, which didn't really come from today's episode as much as just thinking about the overall overarching story a little bit, which I already talked about that. All right, guys, so I will, yes, T'Pring, I know. T'Pring is very excited for some reason. She always seems to know instinctively when I'm about to wrap up the live stream, and so she decides that this is the time to attack me. Yes, I'm talking about you. Do not lick my face. No, stop. Yeah, you can look at the camera. The camera's over there. Yeah, that's my hand you're licking. All right, so remember, guys, you are the salt of the earth, but I am the salty trekker, and T'Pring is going to lick me to death. If that's